You ever get a crystal clear yes to a question only to find out, way later that the answer was actually no? It's beyond frustrating, right? Well, a lot of the time, that confusion comes down to culture. Today, we're going to unpack how two of the simplest words we have, yes and no, can actually open up this whole world of misunderstanding between English and Japanese speakers. So yeah, let's get right into it. So, picture this. You're working with a colleague from Japan, and you ask for a pretty simple favor. They give you a smile, a nod, and so, hi. You think, awesome, that's sorted. But the day goes on, and the favor never gets done. And you're just left there, totally scratching your head. What on earth happened? Well, it wasn't a lie. It wasn't a mistake. It was a classic cultural disconnect. And this right here, this is the absolute heart of the issue. See, in English, when we hear yes, it means I agree. I will do the thing. It's a deal. And that's because our communication is driven by a need for clarity. But in Japanese, hi often just means I hear you or I'm listening. It's an acknowledgement. And the value driving that is totally different. It's all about keeping social harmony. That one little difference, it's the source of so much confusion. So to really understand this, we've got to step into the world of hi and see how this communication style is shaped. And it all comes back to that one key value, harmony.
This is where we have to kind of rewire our brains about what hi means. It's not a simple yes. Think of it more like a conversational signal, like a little verbal nod. When someone says hi, they're showing that they're engaged, that they're present, and that they respect what you're saying. It keeps the whole interaction moving smoothly. But, and this is the important part, it is not a promise that they will do it.
And that really gets to the why of it all. See, in this context, the goal isn't just about trading facts back and forth. It's about maintaining a good relationship. A blunt, direct no can feel really confrontational, and it can just wreck that harmony. So the entire way people communicate is basically built to avoid that, to protect the feelings of everyone in the conversation. Okay, so that leads to the next big question, right? If you can't just come out and say no, how in the world do you turn something down? Well, this is where we get into the subtle art of reading between the lines. The concept we need to understand here is face. A direct IE, a straight-up no, can be really embarrassing for the person who asked. It can make them feel like they've lost face. And at the same time, it can make the person who said no seem kind of harsh or unhelpful, so they lose face too. To avoid all that potential damage to the relationship, a direct no is it's used very, very rarely. So how's it done? Well, this quote from our source material really nails it. Instead of that hard no, the speaker will soften the refusal. You might hear them hesitate or use some really non-committal phrases, or maybe they'll give you a reason that makes it seem like the problem is some outside force, not a personal choice. So here's your practical guide, your cheat sheet for hearing the no that isn't being said out loud. First, listen for hesitation. Is there a long pause, or maybe a phrase like chotto, which basically means, well, it's a little bit difficult. That's a huge signal. Second, are they being vague? Using phrases like, I'll see, or that could be a challenge. And third, are they pointing to outside reasons like, oh, I have another meeting, or my schedule is just so packed? Those three things together are how you decode the real answer. All right, now let's flip the script and look at the other side of this coin. Let's contrast all that with the much more direct world of yes and no you find in Anglo-English cultures. In most English-speaking cultures, the rules of the game are just fundamentally different. Yes means yes, no means no. You take the words at face value. The number one goal is clarity, and the culture really values personal autonomy. You have the right to say no, and everyone else is expected to just respect that. The responsibility is on you to say what you mean. And this is where things can get really tricky. In a Japanese context, after a soft refusal, the other person might actually expect you to ask again, just to show you're serious. But in an English-speaking context, if someone tells you no and you keep asking, well, that comes across as pushy or even disrespectful. It feels like you're not respecting their decision. So, we have these two completely different systems. How do we avoid total communication breakdown? Let's get into a practical guide for how to actually bridge this gap. So let's go back and solve that mystery from the beginning. When your colleague said hi, they weren't saying, yes, I will do it. They were saying, yes, I hear your request. What probably came next were all those soft refusal cues we just talked about. Maybe a little hesitation, a vague comment about their schedule. That was the no. The yes was just the opening, and the real answer was hidden in the details right after. And that brings us to the bottom line, the main takeaway for both sides. If you're an English speaker working in Japan, the key is to listen, really listen, for those nuanced ways of saying no. Pay close attention to the tone, the pauses, the indirect language. And if you're a Japanese speaker working in the West, the challenge is to practice being a bit more direct and to understand that a clear no isn't considered rude here. In fact, it's actually seen as helpful and honest. So, we'll end on this thought. This entire thing has been about just 2 tiny words. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If the meaning of yes can be so incredibly different from one culture to another, what other assumptions are we making every single day? What other complex signals are we missing in our own conversations, whether we're at home or traveling abroad? It's just a huge reminder that real communication, it's always about so much more than just the words we say.